looking at images of Tim Berners-Lee, and this week we're going to be talking about the internet and the World Wide Web. And Tim Berners-Lee, of course, was the man who invented the World Wide Web. How would you like that for a title? Like, you could put that on your business card. Invented World Wide Web. That would be pretty cool on a resume, right? Like, I invented the World Wide Web. So Tim Berners-Lee, he's the guy who created the World Wide Web, and it's different from the internet. We've already talked about the difference between the internet and the World Wide Web. The internet is the infrastructure, the hardware, the cables, all of the telecommunications equipment, the servers, all of the computers. That's all those things being connected together. That's all the internet. The World Wide Web is a service, kind of like a piece of software, which is running on all that hardware. And so why was the World Wide Web created? Because Tim Berners-Lee wanted to send information to people, and he wanted to be able to format that information. And you are looking at the first website and web page ever in the history of the World Wide Web. Because before you had text markup, before you could mark up this text to have hyperlinks, which would take you to other places, other documents, and allow you to do headings and things like that, before you had that, this was all just one big page of text, which looked something like this, right? And so Tim Berners-Lee got tired of seeing text that only looked like this and didn't have any hyperlinks in it. And so he created the World Wide Web so that you could format all of this text and you could have headings like that. And yeah, it's a markup language. It marks up language so that it can be interpreted by browsers. And basically, when you get a web page, so I could right-click, you can right-click any web page, and you can say, hey, view page source, view page source. And when you look at that source, you'll start to see this code in here, right? So there's header code, here's body code, here's H1 for heading 1, and then the end of the H1 tag, right? And so that means make this a heading, make the World Wide Web a heading. And so what happens is this is the text that gets sent over the internet. And it used to be that text only came this way, and then that was it. You just received the text and you read it. And Tim Berners-Lee said, well, if we could send text over the internet, let's send text that is marked up with different tags. Like here's a tag for heading 1, the opening tag, and the closing tag. So make all of this heading 1. And we could send this text over the internet. And then when people receive this text, they can open it in a special piece of software. I'll write a program for that software, and that software will be called a browser. And the browser will allow you to the browser will interpret all of this code and show it to you like this. So when the browser sees H1 and then close H1, it knows to take everything between these two headings and make it heading 1. And so it displays heading 1 style. So it allows you to mark up the text. And that's why it's called Hypertext Markup Language, HTML. That's the language we use at the most rudimentary level to create web pages. And it's called HTML, Hypertext Markup Language, because it allows us to mark up all of our text, and it also allows us to put in hyperlinks. So Hypertext Markup Language allows us to put in hyperlinks, which will take us to other places. So we're talking about the internet and the World Wide Web this week. And the World Wide Web is different from the internet. And Tim Berners-Lee is the guy who created the World Wide Web. And now you've seen the first web page and the first website ever. And he created it so that he would have to no longer be able to, so he would no longer have to read just documents like that without any headings or anything. And so that he could have documents like that. That's why he created it. And he created it when he was working at CERN, right? So if you look on the internet for like first web page ever, you'll be taken off into CERN resource right here. And CERN is the European Research Nuclear something. What does CERN stand for? CERN Wiki. CERN is the European Organization for Nuclear Research. And that's where Tim Berners-Lee was working when he created the World Wide Web. And that happened on April 30th, 1993, 20 years ago, and a few days and months more, the World Wide Web was created. And something else which is kind of cool, there's a resource called the Internet Archive. And so you could go to archive.org, and they have something called the Wayback Machine. And this place archives the internet. And so every day they take a snapshot of all of the web pages in the world, at least the major ones, right? But you know, even like mine is in here, you know, like what did my website look like back in the day? I could put in this website, zippity doo dah, and you can see my activity and inactivity. Here's where I kind of like dropped web programming for a while. And you can see what my website looked like back in the day just by clicking that link. That's what it looked like when I first published it. Actually looks really good. I didn't give myself credit for the kind of work I was doing. You know, not great. Yeah, and obviously, yeah, we won't go into criticism of it. So anyhow, here's what Yahoo looked like back in the day. When Yahoo first started, that's what Yahoo looked like. And here's what YouTube looked like when YouTube first started. This is kind of interesting. The very first time YouTube came online, it said, "I am a male seeking everyone between 18 and 45." Like, I don't know, like, were they copying code from some other website? Or did they have some other website that they were using code from, a dating website? And so they thought, well, let's make it YouTube. And they threw this up, and then they got a snapshot of it, right? But that disappeared quickly. And then YouTube was looking like that, and then that changed quickly, and YouTube looked a lot better and a lot cleaner like this. This was like the first month it was running. You could see videos had like 11 views, 274 views, 161 views, 18 views, right? So that's YouTube back in the day. Here's Google back in the day. Very first day Google premiered. Welcome to Google. That's what it looked like. Might work some of the time, prototype that is much more up to date. And here's what Google looked like about a month later, you know. So kind of cool, 1998. And that's a little bit about the internet. Well, you know, we've already covered a lot of the internet, but that's a little bit about the World Wide Web and Tim Berners-Lee and the origins of the World Wide Web. And you saw about archive.org, where you can look at old websites and see what they look like back in the day. And you learned why Tim Berners-Lee created the World Wide Web, so that he would no longer just receive text documents without headings, but he can now format this text document with certain codes like H1 for a heading, and then let me end that heading so nothing after this point will be heading 1 anymore. And then a browser, when a browser reads this, it'll know to format that as heading 1. That's why Tim Berners-Lee created it. And you know, for the rest of the week, we're going to be looking at the internet and the World Wide Web. So we're going to learn exactly what the internet is. We'll see a video about that. And we're going to talk a little bit about how the internet transcends borders and how it's cross-jurisdictional, and how that has really interesting legal and social implications, right? Because, you know, you want to offer a gambling website in the Cayman Islands, great, that's fine, that's legal in the Cayman Islands. But guess what? Everybody else in the world now can pretty much access your gambling website. And so in California, it's illegal to gamble. Right? Or, you know, what if I lived somewhere else and I wanted to offer, you know, so anyhow, it crosses jurisdictional boundaries, right? So it's got interesting legal and social implications, obviously. People no longer are limited by geography for coalescing and forming group identity. There's also, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about the government governance and guidance of the internet and the World Wide Web. We'll talk about internet and World Wide Web censorship. We'll talk about filter bubbles. We're going to talk about protecting intellectual property and some acts that have come through to protect intellectual property, which would be in another way kind of restrict what you can share on the internet. We'll talk about net neutrality, net neutrality is basically meaning we all have equal access to the internet. We'll talk about the digital divide and Web 2.0 and ISPs and connections, different connections you could get to the internet, and web addresses. And we'll look at some of the technology. We've already seen some of this technology, so we'll review that. We'll talk a little bit about cloudware. We'll talk about search engines. We'll talk about power searching with Google and evaluating search results, and turnitin.com, and citing resources and avoiding plagiarism. We'll look at wikis, e-commerce, crowdsourcing, web conferences, webinars, webcasts, message boards, discussion boards, podcast blogs and blogs, voice over IP, telephony. We've already seen a lot of this stuff, actually. Social networks, instant messaging, texting, and sexting, the underweb, essential computer skill, uploading videos to YouTube. And then we'll talk about visually representing our humanity using data, right, to kind of visually represent stuff. I'll show you a good resource for that. And we'll also talk about what we're learning from online education and how that's changing. So these are some of the things that are coming this week where we're talking about the internet and the World Wide Web.